Let's paint 90% of Angron here using oil paints in a fifth the time it would take using acrylic. Hold on. This stupid thing. All right, there we go. Yeah, so he's going to look like this when we're done. Kind of grimdark. So first I'm going to create some base colors with oil paints. I'm going to use a much bigger brush though. I start off with some burnt umber and about a third Mona Lisa thinner. Burnt sienna is next for the higher points of the model, and then some blue thrown into the burnt sienna for the colder shadows. I'm loosely thinking of the light source coming from his front left and the shadow area coming from his right rear. He is Angron, so I gotta get some red in there, but I'm being somewhat conservative with it. The trick with a model like this is to not letting the primary color of the model completely overwhelm it, or else it looks like a big puddle of red. There's a lot of nuance within the various brown tones and shades that we can play with. With the first coat down, I wipe off about half the oil using a makeup sponge. I'm wiping off nearly all of the high points, but I'm not using any thinner on the sponge, as we want residual oil to blend into the highlights as we add them. In fact, if too much comes off with the sponge, I'll use a brush to spread some surrounding oil back to kind of fill it in a little bit so that we're not just working with bare primer. Now for the midtones. I mix up a very ruddy red and start stippling it into the armor, and I use the existing oil to blend it in. I tend to jump around with oil to be efficient, rather than just do one area at a time. I add a bit of green or blue to the red to cool it off for painting the areas more in shadow. And I add some yellow for highlights, which I want slightly orange, but I keep it really minimal so it doesn't take over the red. At the end, I take some gray-blue to reinforce the most extreme shadows. The starkest example being the tail, where I want half of it almost completely in shadow. Oil stays wet for days, and this is day 2. And I can still go back and start to highlight the more flesh areas, and everything still blends in fine. One thing to keep in mind with oils is, unintuitively, it's harder to make things darker than it is to make them whiter. A little white goes a long way, but if you want a rich black and there's existing lighter paint there, it can almost be better to just wipe that old paint away first. Otherwise, you're just going to be making mud. Lots more detailing to get to this point, but imagine doing all that with layer upon layer of acrylic and all the tedious glazing. Just saying, give oil a shot.